Welcome to this talk on intellectual history and transpersonal history. This is the next in my series on transpersonal history towards a map of a new country. And these talks are subtitled really Footnotes to the Periodic Table of the World's Religious and Philosophical Traditions, based on the periodic table that I've invented. So what is intellectual history? That's the focus of our talk today. Sometimes it's called the history of ideas, and I'm going to look at, firstly in this section, in the introduction, a kind of delineation of the field of intellectual history and the history of ideas, and its links with transpersonal history. I'm going to explore the overlap between the two fields. In the second half, I'm going to discuss some particular practitioners and give some details of their work and how it fits in with this general field that I'm proposing. And in the third section, I'm going to conclude really with some final parting thoughts and some concluding remarks about why all this matters. So what? Why does intellectual history matter? What can it contribute? And of course, my interest here is in the focus of Irenicism and peacemaking. And I'm going to argue that it's a key way of getting an angle into existing conflicts in the world, particularly civil wars and international conflicts such as in Afghanistan, Iraq, as I speak, in Korea. There's problems brewing there. Ongoing problems of unresolved tension in countries like Ireland, Cyprus, Lebanon, and so on. I'm going to argue that in all these cases, Tibet's another example, that intellectual history can shed a light, once harnessed with transpersonal history, in the field of peace building, peacemaking, and confidence building. I'm going to argue that it's because of our neglect of this dimension of reality, and I think historians are to some extent culpable here over the last 50 years, that we've inherited a world of such vast conflicts. We've seen in the last 100 years, really, since 1900, 1914, effectively a continuous war in the world. World War I broke out in 1914. We're coming up to the anniversary of that, 2014. It's been about 100 years of non-stop violence, and the numbers of deaths involved are quite horrendous. Obviously, death's part of nature, but premature deaths of young men, young women fighting, of civilians being bombed, etc., of innocent people being gassed to death in concentration camps. I mean, it's a grim record, this last 100 years. What I'd like to work towards is an anniversary in 2014, which my Peace Studies Institute could participate in, where we set the seal on those 100 years and we achieve peace. We get a lasting peace agreement between the religious and political leaders of the planet. Put the guns down. And I think transpersonal history and intellectual history can play a really, really important role in that confidence building that could lead to that being an actual prospect. We've got 4 years to organise that. So that's why it matters, and I'll be returning to that at the end. But to begin with, let's go back to this question of the history of ideas. What are the history of ideas? What is an idea? Well, this is, of course, a very controversial and much debated question. Ideas are a Greek philosophical concept, going back to a Greek word, which means essentially something that is known, but it has the supplementary connotation of something that is seen. It's the unit. An idea is a unit in which knowledge comes. Knowledge, as a seamless web, is of course broken down into discrete areas such as mathematics, geography, history, sport studies, self-knowledge, botany, etc. I mean, there's the question of what is knowledge is implicit here. I'm writing a book about that at the moment, but suffice it to say, if we accept that knowledge is some kind of subjective interaction with the objective world, there's a dialectic between thought, consciousness, and materiality and energy, then the idea is the unit in which the mind conceptualizes that formation of knowledge. So is it a linguistic thing? I mean, can you have ideas outside of language? That's a very complex question, because obviously our ideas are packaged in linguistic units as words or concepts. They exist in all different languages, of course, so the idea of justice, say, there are words equivalent to that in every language, so far as scholars have studied or linguists have researched the matter. And so there is presumably some kind of idea beyond the sound or the word itself. There's the phenomenon that has given rise to that concept in the minds of men and women over thousands of years. So it's a way of which the mind of man can formulate, regulate, and package experience. We all have experiences. Our life is a continual bombardment of external stimuli, processed through internal responses, feelings, thoughts, reactions, etc. And it's a continual feedback system. It's what philosophers like to call a dialectical process. Ideas play an important role because they're at the cusp of the edge between the two. They're partly externally based, like the idea of light is obviously we all witness light and so on. But then there's the subjective processing of the experience of light, which gives rise to the philosophical observations on light, which in turn can give rise through scientific method to further observations, which in turn sharpen our understanding of what's actually going on in the world of light. So ideas are incredibly important. If we describe science as the way we organise systematic pursuits of knowledge, then ideas again are key levers or tools in which that scientific method can be put to work. And you could argue that what science is doing is sharpening our particular conceptions and ideas at any given time. Obviously, some people work on particular ideas. I mean, if you work with the structure of protein folding, for instance, you're working at the leading edge of that analysis, and you're dealing with concepts such as protein, bonding, chemical bonds, etc., atomic structure. But if you're a political scientist and you're working on the concept of justice, and you're comparing different political philosophies for their views on justice, and you're working with a different set of concepts, but they're all ideas. So these things are rather important. They're embedded in the words, we've agreed, but they're not actually the same as or identical to the words. There's something that the word carries. They're the energy within the words, but the word itself is simply a vehicle for them. Okay, so we've agreed that. Now what else? We can agree, therefore, an idea is a kind of way of seeing. It's connected to perception. As we think, as we perceive, so we formulate and shape and structure reality. Our perception in some way imprints itself on the phenomena that we observe. A child's education is very much about learning the given ideas in a given culture so as to be able to slot in with everybody else's perceptions, to see the world as other people see it. This is, if you want, the socialization principle at the root of a lot of institutionalized education. The child has natural capacity for seeing, but pre-language sees things in a totally unique and spontaneous and almost a mystical way, which is largely lost once you've inherited the cultural presuppositions of that. I think this is probably what Christ meant when he said that we should all try and become as little children again. I think what he was saying is we need to recover that spontaneous wonder that we get when we perceive something for the first time and we just go, wow. I remember, I think as a child, being born in Montreal, I'm pretty sure I remember the experience of seeing snow for the first time and really seeing it, and just how awesome and wonderful it was, being able to go and play in it. It made a huge impression on me, and that sense of wonder at the fact of snow, I think, in a sense, has never left me. Every time it comes, I have that feeling again. And interestingly enough, today as I record this, has been the first really powerful snowfall of the winter up here in Scotland. So let's look a bit deeper into etymology of this word idea.